Django Unchained is a famous American movie directed by Quentin Tarantino. It was released in 2012 and became very popular worldwide. The movie is set in the United States during the 1800s, before the Civil War. It tells the story of a slave named Django who wants freedom. He also wants to find his wife, who was taken away from him. The film is full of action, drama, and strong emotions. The main actor is Jamie Foxx, who plays Django. Christoph Waltz plays Dr. King Schultz, a German bounty hunter. Leonardo DiCaprio plays Calvin Candy, a rich and cruel plantation owner. Kerry Washington plays Brumhilde, Django's wife. Samuel L. Jackson plays Stephen, a loyal servant in Candy's house. All these actors gave amazing performances in this movie. The story begins in Texas in the year 1858. The weather is cold and dark at night. A group of slaves is walking through the forest with chains on their feet. They are being moved by two men who own them. These men are the Speck brothers, and they are cruel and greedy. Among the slaves, there is Django, looking tired and in pain. The Speck brothers plan to sell these slaves in the market. They treat the slaves like animals and make them walk for many miles. Django is wearing a blue blanket because it is cold. Suddenly, the group hears the sound of a horse coming. They see a man riding in a strange wooden cart with a big tooth on top. This man is Dr. King Schultz. Dr. Schultz is a dentist by profession, but he is also a bounty hunter. He is a very clever and polite man who speaks with a German accent. He stops his cart near the group and starts talking to the Speck brothers. Schultz wants to buy a slave who can help him identify some wanted men. He asks if one of the slaves knows the Brittle brothers. The Speck brothers are confused and suspicious. They ask Schultz why he wants to know about the Brittle brothers. Schultz explains that the Brittle brothers are criminals, and he needs someone who can recognize them. Django says he knows the Brittle brothers because they worked on the same plantation as him. Schultz becomes interested in Django and decides to buy him. Schultz offers to buy Django from the Speck brothers. At first, the Speck brothers refuse because they want to sell all the slaves together. Schultz tries to explain politely, but the brothers become angry. One of them takes out his gun, but Schultz is faster. He shoots one Speck brother dead on the spot. The other brother is shocked and scared. Schultz then tells the remaining brother to give him the bill of sale for Django. The man obeys because he fears Schultz. Schultz pays him and makes Django a free man immediately. Schultz also gives Django clothes to wear because he was only in rags. The other slaves watch everything quietly, amazed at what is happening. Schultz kills the second Speck brother too when he tries to attack. After killing both brothers, Schultz talks to the other slaves. He says they are free now and can do whatever they want. Schultz even gives them the key to remove their chains. The slaves are happy and surprised because they never expected freedom. Schultz then asks Django to come with him on a journey. Django agrees because Schultz is kind and different from other white men. Schultz and Django travel together in the wooden cart with the big tooth on top. Schultz starts asking Django questions about the Brittle brothers. Django explains that they worked as overseers on a plantation where he and his wife lived. They were cruel men who used to beat slaves badly. Schultz says he wants to find them because they are wanted criminals. Django agrees to help because he also hates them. On the way, Schultz explains what a bounty hunter is. He tells Django that bounty hunters catch criminals and get money for turning them in, dead or alive. Django is surprised by this job but finds it interesting. Schultz says he needs Django's help to identify the Brittle brothers. In return, Schultz promises to help Django find his wife. Django is very happy to hear this promise. That night, Schultz and Django stop at a small town. Schultz enters a bar with Django, which shocks the bartender because Django is black. In those days, black men were not allowed in bars. Schultz calmly tells the bartender to bring drinks for both of them. When the bartender refuses, Schultz tells him to go and bring the sheriff. The bartender quickly runs outside to call the sheriff. the sheriff enters the bar with an angry face. He sees Django sitting there and becomes very upset. The sheriff asks Schultz why a black man is inside the bar. Schultz smiles and explains that Django is with him. Suddenly, Schultz takes out his gun very fast and shoots the sheriff in the chest. The sheriff falls dead on the floor. Django is shocked by this sudden action. People outside the bar hear the gunshot and start screaming. The town becomes noisy and full of panic. Some men run to call the marshal, who is more powerful than the sheriff. Schultz remains calm and tells Django not to worry. He explains that the sheriff was actually a criminal with a price on his head. Schultz shows Django a wanted poster to prove it. Django starts to trust Schultz even more. Soon, the marshal and many men with guns arrive at the bar. They surround the place and ask Schultz to come outside. Schultz walks out slowly with his hands up. He speaks politely and explains that the dead man was a wanted criminal. Schultz shows the paper with the bounty to the marshal. The marshal checks it and realizes Schultz is telling the truth. The marshal lets Schultz go free. After this event, Schultz and Django leave the town quickly. Django feels amazed by Schultz's cleverness. He learns that Schultz always has a reason for his actions. Schultz tells Django that the law is on their side as long as they follow the rules. Django likes this new life because it is full of freedom and adventure. He also feels powerful for the first time. Schultz and Django travel for many days, catching criminals together. Django learns how to shoot and becomes very skilled with a gun. Schultz teaches him how to aim and how to stay calm during fights. Django enjoys learning and feels proud of his new skills. The two men become friends and respect each other. Schultz also tells Django many stories about Germany and his old life. Winter comes, and the land is covered with snow. Django now wears warm clothes and a big coat like Schultz. They continue hunting criminals and making money. Django becomes famous as a skilled gunfighter. People in town start recognizing him as Schultz's partner. Schultz also gives Django a part of the reward money every time they catch someone. Django feels happy because he can buy things for himself. One evening, Schultz and Django sit near a fire. They talk about life and dreams. Django tells Schultz about his wife, Brumhilde. He says she was sold to another plantation after they tried to escape. Django feels sad because he has not seen her for a long time. Schultz listens carefully and feels sorry for Django. Schultz asks Django if he knows where Brumhilde is now. Django says she is at a big plantation in Mississippi called Candyland. The owner of Candyland is a rich man named Calvin Candy. Django says Candy is very cruel and loves making slaves fight each other. Schultz decides to help Django rescue his wife. He says they need a clever plan. Schultz explains that they cannot just walk into Candyland and ask for Brumhilde. Candy will never agree to sell her easily. They need to trick him. Schultz comes up with an idea. He says they will pretend to be buyers of fighters for Mandingo fights. These fights are when slaves fight each other for money and entertainment. Candy loves this business, so he will trust them. Django agrees with the plan, but he feels nervous. Schultz tells him to act like a black slaver, which means a black man who works for white men to control other slaves. Django does not like this idea at first. But Schultz explains that it is the only way to make Candy believe the story. Django agrees because he wants to save Brumhilde no matter what. The two men start preparing for the journey to Mississippi. Schultz buys nice clothes for both of them so they look rich and important. Django gets a shiny blue outfit with a fancy hat. Schultz dresses like a businessman with style. They also buy 2 strong horses for the trip. Schultz practices the plan with Django many times so that they do not make mistakes. On the way to Candyland, Schultz tells Django more details about Calvin Candy. He says Candy is not very smart, but he is very dangerous. Candy has many men working for him, and his head servant is Steven, an old black man. Steven is very clever and loyal to Candy. Schultz warns Django to be careful because Steven will notice everything. Django listens seriously and remembers every word. After a long journey, Schultz and Django finally reach Candyland. The plantation is huge, with big white buildings and many slaves working in the fields. They are greeted by some of Candy's men, who take them to the main house. Django looks around and feels angry because he sees slaves being treated badly. Schultz stays calm and reminds Django to act according to the plan. Inside the house, they meet Calvin Candy for the first time. Candy is wearing a fancy suit and holding a cigarette. He smiles, but his eyes look cruel. Schultz introduces himself as a man who wants to buy Mandingo fighters. Candy becomes very happy because he loves this business. He starts showing off and talking proudly about his fighters. Schultz acts friendly, and Django stays quiet like a professional. Candy takes Schultz and Django to watch a Mandingo fight. Two strong slaves are forced to fight each other until one dies. Candy enjoys the fight and cheers loudly. Django feels sick and angry, but he hides his feelings. He knows if he makes a mistake, the plan will fail. After the fight, Schultz pretends to be very impressed and says he wants to buy the best fighter. Candy invites Schultz and Django to his big house for dinner. They agree and return to the main building. Before the dinner starts, Schultz asks Candy about Brumhilde. He says he wants a slave girl who speaks German, to make Django's cover story stronger. Candy is surprised but says yes because Brumhilde does speak German. Schultz pretends it is just for fun, but inside he is planning carefully. Finally, Brumhilde is brought into the room. Django sees her for the first time in a long time. He feels his heart beating fast, but he stays calm to avoid suspicion. Brumhilde does not understand what is happening, but she is happy to see Django alive. Schultz talks to her in German to make it look normal. Candy laughs and enjoys the show, not knowing the real truth. During dinner, Candy talks a lot about his business and how powerful he is. Schultz keeps acting polite, but he hates Candy inside. Django says very little but acts like he is loyal to Schultz. Steven, the old servant, watches Django carefully. He does not trust Django and starts feeling something is wrong. Steven decides to keep an eye on him. The tension in the room grows. After dinner, everyone relaxes in the living room. Candy enjoys a drink and smokes his cigar. Schultz keeps talking about the fighter deal, acting calm. Django sits quietly, but his eyes sometimes look at Brumhilde. Steven notices these small looks and becomes suspicious. He starts thinking that Django and Brumhilde know each other. Steven leaves the room to plan something. Steven calls Brumhilde to the kitchen and questions her. At first, she says nothing because she is scared. But Steven is very clever and keeps asking. Finally, Brumhilde starts crying, and Steven understands the truth. He learns that Django is her husband. Steven feels angry because he thinks Django is disrespecting Candy's house. Steven decides to tell Candy about this secret. Steven returns to the living room and whispers something to Candy. Candy listens, and his face changes. He becomes serious and angry. Candy asks everyone to sit down again. He takes out a big skull from a box and places it on the table. He gives a strange speech about slaves and loyalty. Candy then points his finger at Django and Brumhilde. He says they are husband and wife. Django feels his body freeze, but he does not move. Schultz also stays calm but knows the plan is broken. Candy laughs loudly and says they cannot fool him. He orders his men to point guns at Django and Schultz. Candy says if Django wants Brumhilde, he must pay a very high price. Schultz agrees because he wants to protect Django and Brumhilde for now. The room becomes silent with fear. Candy brings a paper and makes Schultz sign the deal. Schultz pays for Brumhilde with fake smiles. Everyone pretends to be calm, but inside they are ready for a fight. After the papers are signed, Candy demands that Schultz shake his hand to make the deal complete. Schultz hates Candy so much that he does not want to touch him. Schultz tries to control his anger, but he cannot anymore. Suddenly, Schultz takes out his small gun and shoots Candy in the chest. Candy falls back with a shocked face. Everyone in the room screams loudly. In the same second, Schultz is shot dead by Candy's men. Django grabs his gun and starts shooting fast. Bullets fly everywhere. The room turns into a battlefield with blood and broken glass. Django kills many men before escaping outside. After the bloody shootout, Django runs outside the house. He shoots more men on the porch and tries to reach his horse. But there are too many enemies around. Django fights bravely and kills several men. Suddenly, his bullets finish, and he is captured. The men beat him badly and tie him with ropes. Django is taken away while Brumhilde screams in fear. The next day, Django wakes up in chains. He is sitting on a horse with 3 men guarding him. They plan to take him to a mine and make him work there until death. Django feels hopeless, but he does not give up. He starts talking to the men and tricks them with his words. He says he knows about a hidden treasure, and the men become curious. Django convinces them to untie him so he can show the treasure spot. When the men untie him, Django moves fast. He grabs a gun and shoots all 3 of them. Django frees himself and takes their clothes, guns, and money. He also takes dynamite from their bags for a plan. Django feels strong and ready for revenge. He rides back to Candyland to finish everything. At Candyland, everyone is preparing for Calvin Candy's funeral. Steven is in charge of the house now. Django arrives quietly and hides behind the trees. Then he walks into the house with guns in both hands. Django shoots the guards one by one. People scream and run as bullets fly everywhere. Django kills every man who worked for Candy. Finally, Django walks into the big hall where Steven waits. Steven is scared but tries to act brave. He tells Django that he cannot win because he is just a slave. Django laughs and says he is a free man now. Django shoots Steven in the legs so he cannot walk. Then Django lights the dynamite and leaves the house. Steven screams as the house explodes in a big blast. Django finds Brumhilde outside and helps her onto a horse. They look at the burning house and feel free at last. Django smiles and says, "Let's go, my love." They ride away together under the night sky. Django feels proud because he fought for his freedom and his wife. The movie ends with Django and Brumhilde starting a new life far from slavery. It is a story of courage and love. Django and Brumhilde ride through the dark night after escaping the burning Candyland. The sky is full of stars, and the sound of horses fills the air. Django feels a mix of relief and sadness because Schultz is dead. He remembers the man who gave him freedom and risked everything to help him. Django looks at Brumhilde and promises himself never to let her suffer again. Their journey is not over yet, but they finally have hope. They ride far into the woods and stop near a quiet river. The water shines under the moonlight, and the air feels cold. Django helps Brumhilde off the horse and makes a small fire. She sits near the fire, still shocked by everything that happened. Django takes her hands and says softly that they are free now. Tears fall from her eyes because she never believed this day would come. Django holds her close as the night becomes silent. The next morning, Django wakes up early. He walks to the river and washes his face, thinking about the future. Brumhilde joins him, and they talk about where to go next. They cannot stay in the south because slave catchers will be looking for them. Django says they will travel west, where there are fewer plantations. Brumhilde smiles and says she trusts him. For the first time in years, they feel like a family again. They start riding again, moving through forests and empty roads. Along the way, they see signs of war and cruelty everywhere. Django notices groups of slaves being marched by white men with guns. He feels anger but knows he cannot fight everyone. Brumhilde looks away because it hurts her to see those scenes. Django promises her that one day things will change. For now, they must stay alive and free. They stop at a small town to buy food and supplies. Django wears a hat to hide his face, and Brumhilde covers her head with a scarf. They walk into a store quietly, hoping nobody recognizes them. The store owner looks at them strangely but says nothing. Django pays with the money he took from the men he killed. As they leave, Django sees a wanted poster with his name on it. He knows they must leave quickly. They ride out of town as fast as they can. Django feels the tension growing because now bounty hunters may come after him. He checks his guns and makes sure they are loaded. Brumhilde stays close to him, holding the reins tightly. The road ahead is long and dangerous, but Django feels strong. He remembers every fight, every pain, and every loss. He knows freedom is worth every risk he takes. Night falls again, and they find a small cabin in the woods. The place looks empty and safe for now. Django and Brumhilde go inside and make a small fire. They share bread and water while talking about their dreams. Brumhilde says she wants a small house with flowers in front. Django smiles and says he will build that house one day. They hold each other tightly, knowing that love gave them strength to survive. The next day, Django hears horses in the distance. He looks out and sees two men with rifles riding toward the cabin. Django quickly tells Brumhilde to hide behind the house. He grabs his guns and waits at the door. When the men arrive, they ask if he has seen a runaway slave and a dangerous black man named Django. Django smiles and says no. The men look suspicious and decide to check inside. Before they can enter, Django pulls out his guns and shoots both men fast. The sound of gunfire echoes through the forest. Django drags the bodies away and hides them behind the trees. He knows more men will come soon because the reward is high. Django tells Brumhilde they cannot stay here anymore. They pack their things and ride away again. Deeper into the wilderness. The chase has begun. As they travel, Django starts thinking about Schultz again. He remembers the lessons Schultz taught him about confidence and skill. Schultz gave him hope when nobody else cared. Django whispers to himself that he will live free for Schultz too. He looks at Brumhilde and feels grateful for love and loyalty. Every mile they ride takes them closer to a life without chains and fear. As Django and Brumhilde move deeper into the forest, they find a quiet riverbank. They decide to rest and drink water. Django ties the horses near a tree and checks the surroundings carefully. He knows they cannot trust anyone now. Brumhilde washes her face in the cool river and feels a little peace. Django sits beside her, holding his gun close, because danger can come at any time. While they sit near the river, Brumhilde asks Django about Schultz. Django stays silent for a moment and then speaks softly. He tells her how Schultz saved him from slavery and treated him like an equal. Django says Schultz believed in him when nobody else did. Brumhilde listens with tears in her eyes. She says Schultz was a good man, and Django nods with respect. That night, Django cannot sleep. He looks at the stars and remembers the time when he was still a slave. He remembers the pain of being whipped and the night spent in chains. He remembers the day Brumhilde was taken from him. Django clenches his fists because those memories still burn inside him. But now, he feels proud because he fought back and won. For the first time, he feels free in his heart. The next morning, they start moving again. The sun is bright, and the road ahead looks endless. Django keeps his eyes sharp for any sign of trouble. He knows bounty hunters will not stop searching for him. He checks the gun on his belt again and again. Brumhilde stays close behind him, trusting him completely. Their only goal now is to find a safe place to start a new life. As they ride through the hills, Django sees smoke in the distance. He stops and looks carefully. It seems like a small town with a few wooden houses. Django thinks for a moment and decides to go there. They need food, bullets, and clothes. When they enter the town, people look at them strangely. Django walks tall with confidence, but he keeps his hand near his gun just in case. They stop in front of a general store. Django ties the horses outside and tells Broomhilda to stay close. Inside, the store smells of tobacco and leather. A fat man stands behind the counter, chewing on something. He looks at Django and says, "What do you want?" Django asks for bread, meat, and bullets. The man nods slowly and starts packing the items. But Django notices a wanted poster on the wall with his face on it. The store owner keeps looking at Django while packing the goods. Django feels the tension in the room grow stronger. He pays quickly and grabs the supplies. As they leave, Django sees the man walking to the back room. Django knows he is going to alert someone. He tells Broomhilda to get on the horse fast. They ride away quickly before anyone can stop them. The wind blows hard as they leave the town behind. After an hour of riding, Django hears gunshots behind them. He looks back and sees 3 men on horses chasing them. Django pulls out his rifle and fires a shot. One man falls from his horse. The other 2 keep coming, shooting their guns wildly. Django tells Broomhilda to hold on tight as he rides faster. They reach a hill and use the rocks for cover. Django aims carefully and shoots the second man. The last man runs away. When the danger is gone, Broomhilda hugs Django tightly. She is shaking with fear, but Django holds her and says everything will be fine. He knows this is just the beginning because the reward on his head is very high. Django decides they need a better plan to stay safe. They cannot keep running forever. He thinks about heading west into the mountains where no one will follow them. Broomhilda agrees with him. That night, they camp under the open sky. The fire burns softly as they sit together. Django starts telling Broomhilda about his dreams. He says he wants a house far away from plantations, a place where no one can hurt them. Broomhilda smiles and says she wants a garden with flowers. Django promises her that one day they will have all of that. For the first time in years, they feel real hope. The next day, they cross a wide river using an old wooden bridge. The bridge creaks under the weight of the horses. Django looks down and sees the water moving fast. If the bridge breaks, they will die. But they cross safely and continue on the dirt road. The land ahead looks wild and empty, with tall trees and mountains in the distance. Django feels that freedom is near, but danger is still behind them. As Django and Broomhilda ride toward the mountains, the road becomes rough and silent. The trees around them are tall and dark, and the wind whistles through the branches. Broomhilda feels tired but does not complain. She knows Django is doing everything to protect her. Django looks strong, but inside he is worried about what comes next. Every sound in the forest makes him hold his gun tighter. While they travel, Django starts remembering the first time he met Schultz. It was a cold night, and Django was walking in chains with other slaves. His back was sore, and his feet were bleeding. Then a strange man on a horse appeared with a smile on his face. That man was Schultz, the German bounty hunter. Schultz spoke politely, which surprised Django because no white man ever talked to him like that before. Schultz bought Django from the traders and freed him right there. Django could not believe it at first because freedom felt like a dream. Schultz told him he needed his help to find the Brittle brothers. Django agreed because those men had hurt him badly in the past. That was the beginning of their partnership. Schultz gave Django a horse, clothes, and a gun. For the first time, Django felt like a man and not property. Schultz also taught Django how to shoot. At first, Django was nervous, but Schultz was patient. He showed Django how to stand, aim, and pull the trigger slowly. Django practiced every day, shooting bottles and targets in the open fields. Soon, he became one of the fastest shooters Schultz had ever seen. Schultz smiled with pride and said Django was ready to face any danger. Django never forgot those lessons. As Django rides now, he remembers those training days with a heavy heart. Schultz was more than a partner, he was a friend. Django wishes he could thank him one more time. He knows Schultz died because of his fight to save Brumhilde. Django swears silently that Schultz's sacrifice will never be wasted. He will live free, and he will protect Brumhilde no matter what. That promise gives him strength. They finally reach a small valley where the grass is green and the water is clear. It looks peaceful, with no signs of men or guns. Django stops his horse and looks around. He decides this is a good place to rest for a while. Brumhilde smiles because the air feels clean and safe. They set up a small camp and build a fire. For the first time in days, they feel truly calm. That night, they sit near the fire and talk about the future. Brumhilde says she wants a family and a home where no one can separate them again. Django listens and holds her hand tightly. He says they will have everything she dreams of, even if it takes years. Brumhilde smiles and leans on his shoulder. The stars above them shine like diamonds, and the night feels full of hope. The next morning, Django goes hunting for food. He walks deep into the forest with his rifle ready. The sound of birds fills the air, and the sun shines through the trees. After an hour, he catches a deer and brings it back to camp. Brumhilde cooks the meat over the fire. And they eat together happily. For a moment, life feels normal, like they are just two people in love, not hunted by the world. Days pass, and they move further west. The land becomes wilder, and the mountains grow taller. Django feels proud because every mile takes them away from slavery. They cross rivers, climb hills, and sleep under the stars. Brumhilde becomes stronger with every step. She learns to ride fast and even holds a gun when needed. Django teaches her because he wants her to be safe. Their bond becomes unbreakable. One evening, they reach a wide plain where the grass dances in the wind. Django stops his horse and looks far into the horizon. He sees a small wooden house with smoke coming from the chimney. They ride closer and find an old couple living there. The couple looks kind and offers them food and water. Django tells them they are travelers looking for work. The old man nods and lets them stay for the night. Inside the warm house, Django and Brumhilde eat fresh bread and soup. The old woman smiles at them and says they look like a strong couple. Django feels something he has not felt in years: peace. After dinner, they sit near the fire and listen to the sound of the wind outside. Django dreams of having a house like this one day. He knows it will not be easy, but he believes it is possible now. Before leaving the next morning, Django thanks the couple and gives them some money. The old man shakes his hand and wishes them luck. Django and Brumhilde ride away with new hope in their hearts. They head toward the mountains where the land is free and the law is weak. Django knows they will have to fight again one day, but for now, they are safe. For now, they are together, and that is enough.